Stars shining bright above you. Night breezes seem to whisper, I love you. Birds singing in the sycamore tree. Dream a little dream of me. Welcome, kindreds. It's Jessica the Story Witch. I'm actually off to a wedding in a little bit. So I'm filming a few videos just before we go, and I'm kind of putting off saying what this video is about. I'm nerve-sighted, as my daughter would say. I'm nervous and I'm excited because I have decided to try and start a tarot tag. And it kind of feels exciting, but it also feels like nervous because what if nobody else joins in? So please join in. The reason I'm starting this tag is it's going to be my birthday next month on the 4th of June, and I am turning 40. And it's funny because when I first joined YouTube, I was mainly watching kind of witchy channels like Kellyanne Maddox and Molly Roberts and people like that. Awesome channels. But I didn't realise that this whole kind of tarot community and the whole tarot tag thing was a thing. And since I've been on here, I've just been it's so cool because I found so many new channels because of the tags, and just really people that, you know, like I actually do really want to be friends with them in real life. So I'm actually, like I said, gonna start a tag, and this tag is going to be called Decks for Decades because it's tying into my birthday. I've been reflecting quite a lot about kind of turning 40, as I do, I think, most years. I think that's kind of normal when you're having a birthday, you know, it's kind of almost like another new year again, so you have a chance to kind of think about things. But I've also been thinking back over the last 4 decades of my life, and so this tag is basically about associating a deck. And I know it's going to be tricky because a decade is a long time, 10 years, lots of things can happen in 10 years, but sometimes I think that level of thought that you need to be able to do this kind of tag is helpful and is interesting, you know, so you can find little interesting insights. So yeah, Decks for Decades is the tag, and I'll put that in the title of the video and in the description box and everything. So the idea is that you choose a deck for each decade of your life. Not necessarily like the deck, you can do it however you want to. The way I'm going to do it is I've chosen a deck for each of the decades of my life so far, which and this is kind of why I was saying about how the YouTubers and things I used to watch are kind of like younger YouTubers, and I've realised that in the tarot community I'm by no means the youngest person here, which is really cool as well. So other people are going to have even more decades to associate decks for than me, which is really cool as well. But yeah, how I've done it is I've got 4 decades of life so far because I'm coming up to 40, and I've chosen 4 decks, one to kind of sum up the kind of energy of that decade for me. So for my first decade, so 0 to 10, I've chosen the Mythic Tarot. And the reason I chose this for my first decade, it's kind of hard, isn't it? Because your awareness and memory, well, my awareness and memory of that first decade of my life is, I have some really vivid memories, and there's also lots of things that, like when I look at photographs of that time, I don't, you know, I remember because of the photograph rather than remember because I remember, you know, but there are definitely things I remember. So this deck is, I know I've spoken about this before, it was like one of the first decks, it was the first deck that I wanted to buy but I didn't buy. At the time I was under the influence of you should never buy your own tarot deck. But the reason I've chosen it to represent this first decade of my life is because story, and particularly myth, was so important to me in these first 10 years. I was that child who was like, you know, I would be found hiding somewhere with a book, you know, or if they sent me to go and clear my room or something, then I'd just be like reading instead of doing what I was supposed to be doing. So all the stories, it was like having all these little worlds to tap into. If you have read Neil Gaiman's, oh, what's it called? It's like a story about a boy who is living like in the countryside. I think it's sort of partly autobiographical, although Neil says no, but he always likes to say no, that his works are not autobiographical. And yeah, he basically says the same thing in that story, you know. I know it's called The Ocean at the End of the Lane. It's a really good book. If you haven't read it, you should read it. It's really cool. And he talks about that as well, you know. It's like when you've got a book, if you've got stories, however kind of weird and complicated and how much you don't understand kind of what's going on around you in the real world, those stories are kind of a shelter and a safe place, and that was definitely the case for me. Although also I think I learned an awful lot from reading stories, which helped me to kind of understand human interactions and things as well in the real world, and helped me to kind of feel more powerful in my own story as well. So yeah, that was my first decade, the Mythic Tarot. And then for 10 to 20, I have gone with Dark Days. It makes me laugh, the title of this deck as well, because Dark Days, obviously. But I bought this from Little Red Tarot. I've been eyeing it up for a little while and decided to go and get it. I don't actually use it that much, but I do enjoy kind of looking at the imagery. Sorry, it's a bit reflecting. I'm trying to kind of work out how to not make that happen. But lots of I find this deck very much, for me anyway, sort of speaks to sort of identity of self. And for me, that 10 to 20 was very much about kind of like figuring out who I am in this world, you know, who I wanted to be. And, you know, there were some really confusing times, as I'm sure, you know, as you're a teen and early adult. It's almost like people expect you, and I was kind of quite a responsible, sensible kid generally, and because of that, people expect certain things from you which you aren't necessarily ready for, you know. And so I did some stupid shit, you know, and and felt really bad about it, you know, felt really kind of guilty and stupid, and you know, all those things that, you know, if you're drunk and you do stupid things. And it took me a good while afterwards to be able to realise that actually I was still very much just a child, and to give myself a break really about that. So yeah, that is my 0 to 20, my second decade. Yeah. Kind of battling, and that kind of inner battle as well with yourself. I do find this deck very much is that kind of self-identity and kind of coming to terms with who you are, and also kind of, it is Dark Days, but it's also kind of showing that, you know, it's quite powerful as well, and that you come through it and you do have a more coherent and formed and powerful sense of self afterwards. So that is 0 to 20, and then 20 to 30, I have gone, and I know not lots of people maybe don't like this deck, but I really do like this deck, and that's the Joie de Vivre by Paulina Cassidy. When I started reading, for a very long time I had a Rider-Waite deck and kind of like basically another Rider-Waite deck. And so this was one of the first branching out more decks that I got, and I think a lot of people, and this kind of connects, I know, with some of the things going on in the community at the moment with that kind of nice washing idea, you know, of decks and kind of fluffy decks. I don't find this a fluffy deck at all, and this is why I have chosen it for these 20 to 30, because for me 20 to 30 was very much about again really kind of figuring out what I wanted to do, my place in the world. I'd got channeled into I knew like I am good at connecting with people and teaching, and I enjoy being with children. I enjoy being with people, basically. I do like that. I also do enjoy time by myself. But I ended up being a teacher, which I know if you watch my videos, I've mentioned this before, a primary school teacher. And during that time, between 20 and 30, I realised that that wasn't really the right path for me, and I started to look into different sort of things like Reiki and reflexology, and I actually trained as a holistic therapist, and then later on as a doula, but yeah, that came later as well. So I guess kind of going more to what I knew I was, which was a witch, and actually making that my job rather than having a kind of day job and a this is who I am kind of job in the evenings and weekends and stuff. So this deck is kind of links with me with that teaching, because it's got those kind of almost childlike images, but then it's also got those much deeper, and you know, people sort of talk about children as if they are lesser than somehow than adults, and it fries my brain really, that because children are so connected with so many things, and they are very aware, you know. They're not these kind of just adults in waiting, you know. They are whole formed people of their own and I think, you know, we lump times of life, and I'm doing it now with this tag, we kind of chunk life into childhood and adulthood and old age and things like that, and sometimes that is not helpful, because we are people progressing through our lives, and we are it's not as distinct as that, you know. It's suddenly at 18 you don't wake up in the morning and like, oh, now I know what I want to do with my life, you know, I'm no longer a child. It just doesn't work like that, and I think sometimes putting these kind of these labels on different stages of life makes it more difficult to just appreciate people as they are, and you know, individuals and who they are. So yeah, I think this deck, I chose it because it looks kind of whimsical, and it is very story driven again, which I do like that in a deck that is something that I connect with a lot. There's an awful lot in here. In the little white book, even though it is tiny, there's names for each of these of the characters and all the cards and things, so you can kind of follow their story through the cards as well. So that's what I feel like. It's like as if the reason, yeah, the reason I chose it is because it looks kind of nice and pretty and easygoing, but actually there's an awful lot more going on beneath the surface, and those stories run really, really deep. And so yeah, for me that decade was very much about burrowing into my deeper self, into the shadow self, and bringing things to light, you know. So yeah, so that is that deck for me for that decade, 20 to 30. And then 30 to 40 I have gone with, for this, which is, for me, that was the stage of life where I became a mother. I gave birth to my daughter when I was 31. And I've chosen Ostara because to me this deck is so, it speaks very much to family and motherhood, and I feel like that is just perfect to kind of sum up this stage of my life. I'll try and get some of the cards up to show you. I haven't talked very much about the individual cards, but that would be kind of cool as well. Maybe you could even pick out like cards that specifically kind of sum up things or events that happened during that particular decade of your life. There are definitely some in dark days, which I could almost kind of see, yeah, you know, that was me. Like, yeah, just look at that, you know, family, more, I think, than you know, there's more kind of family image and being kind of together and connections, not just male-female connections. There are other possibilities. There's definitely more children in this deck as well, you know, that it just feels that way to me, you know. It feels more family and relationship driven. and like I say, not just love relationships, relationships in general, you know, relationships with ourselves and all the different sort of relationships, work relationships and family relationships, you know, with our own parents, with our children, things like that as well. So yeah, this this deck sums that up for me. So that is my 30 to 40. So that is my last deck, because I've only got 4 decades to go on so far, but you may have more, you may have less, and that is fine. And if you're kind of part way through a decade, then maybe you might already know what, or you kind of can kind of guess what deck is going to kind of fit best with that particular decade for you. And there is a prize. I should have probably mentioned that at the start, shouldn't I? Try and entice more people in to do the tag. I have 2 decks here, which this one I've had a very long time and I do not use it hardly ever. So I want to pass this on to somebody who would like to use it. And similarly, except that I haven't had it very long, is the Aquarian Tarot, which I just really have not connected with. And I don't keep decks that I don't connect with. So whoever is, I'm just going to do like a random winner of everyone who does the tag. I'll just draw a random winner, and that you can choose either the Aquarian Tarot or the Aquarian Tarot, which is backwards. Yeah, and if, I don't know, if you have already got either of those decks, then we'll think of something else. I have actually started putting together a few other little bits and bobs as well, which I'm going to include, but they're not quite ready yet, so I'm going to make like a little kind of gift present, because it's like birthday related. I was going to make like a little birthday type present to give to the winner as well. So yeah, so I would love it if you do this tag. Please do the tag. And let me know. And if you're not on YouTube and you're thinking, oh, I like this, but I don't, I haven't got a channel and things like that, then that's cool. Just comment with your decks down below. I'm not sure whether, I think it's probably fairer if it's the giveaways only for people who actually do the kind of video response. But I am going to do on my Instagram, I haven't sorted that out yet when I'm going to do it, but I'm going to have like a giveaway on my Instagram as well, which will just be like a kind of photo response thing. So please don't feel left out if you're not, if you don't make videos on YouTube. But yeah, let me know what you think, whether you think it's a cool idea, and get thinking about your decks for decades. And like I said, please do the tag. Warmest blessings, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon. Stars shining bright above you. Night breezes seem to whisper, I love you. Birds singing in the sycamore tree, dream a little dream of me.